This afternoon, we are going to be touching on a very sensitive and hurtful subject. We are going to talk about suicide that has taken over this community. And this is a serious issue because it has affected so many families, from young adults to children. And Tommie, can you please tell us the information that you know in regards to this subject?
Well, first, I'd like to touch on that in this area specifically, in Binghamton, in Broome County, in the Triple Cities as a whole, in the past decade, 5 years, and most significantly the past 2 years, I would say, um, childhood suicides have been occurring. And childhood suicides are not something that you typically hear about every day. It's not something that people talk about. It's not something that you really hear about. And in this area specifically, it is something that you hear about. It is something that is talked about. And it's horrible and it's sad. And, one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that the way we treat other people in our communities, not just on social media, not just in our workplace, as a whole, as a community, how we behave as citizens and as society members, it really impacts our youth and what they see and what they feel. And it's evident to me and to other young adults and, community members that there's a problem, a huge problem. And this goes as far as bullying and drug use and, social media and how we speak to one another on social media. There's a problem because there should not be this many childhood suicides and young adult suicides in one area. And I think it's really important to, be there for other people. People need other people, and that's something that we lack as this generation continues.
When we are talking about the children, can you specify a little bit how old are these children that you're speaking of?
This past fall, in November, it was about my brother, who is also 14 right now, lost a friend in November to suicide, who was 14 years old. This was horrible. This was tragic. It was unexpected. Nobody knew what he was going through. Nobody knew what was going on. Just one day he was here and he was gone. And unfortunately, on that same day, in the same area, there was another childhood suicide, and this child was only 9 years old, and this occurred on the same day. And these kids they're not even at an age where you could consider them a fully developed processing teenager. These are kids, these are children. And I think for a lot of people, it's really shocking to see in the news or to see an obituary that a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old has died unexpectedly. People are shocked by this because it's not often heard about, it's not often talked about, but these unexpected deaths that you see are usually suicides. And it's really hard for people to accept that, and people are, question why is this going on? Why did they do it? Why did they do it? How could a 9-year-old possibly ever even fathom taking their own life? That's the question as a society we need to ask ourselves. Why are 9-year-old children, why are 12-year-old children taking their own life?
And aside of the 14-year-old, which happened to be your brother's best friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there anyone else that you personally knew from the people who committed suicide?
Over the years, I've lost quite a few people to suicide, not all being children, but you know, I don't have enough fingers to list how many people I've personally lost to suicide in the past, I'd say 5 years. And not all of these people were extremely close to me, but they were people that I knew and people that I cared about, and people that I never in a million years would ever expect to wake up and hear that they had taken their own life. So I think that suicide is something that does happen. It's a rare event, but it's a rare event because it's a tragic, rare event, but it does happen frequently. It does happen more than the public seems to think. And it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue. You know.
As a young woman who's interested in working in their, should we say, with mental health, what do you think is happening for these occurrences? Or maybe that would be so difficult to kind of come up with an idea, right? We don't know exactly what could possess someone to take their own lives. But I think the best question would be, what should we do as a society? What's there to look out for in order to prevent someone from killing themselves?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the stigma that surrounds mental health. It's really uncomfortable for people to talk about it. You know, some people would argue that there isn't a stigma surrounding mental health at this point in 2017, but there is. It's alive. It's well. People don't want to get help. People don't want to seek treatment because they are fearful of being judged. They're fearful of, you know, thinking that they are crazy or having other people think that they're crazy. And just because you're going through something or have a disorder or have anxiety issues or whatever you might have going on with you mentally, it doesn't mean that you're crazy. You know, there's this connotation with the word crazy that, you know, and that derives from history and from, you know, asylums. You know, even here in Binghamton, New York, we still have our historic castle on the hill, but it's, you know, it was our first inebriate asylum in upstate New York, and it's right up at the top of Robinson Street if anybody's interested in checking it out. But, you know, as far as history can go back with mental health, you know, years and years and decades and hundreds of years ago, if you were thought to have any kind of mental illness or any mental problem, essentially you were unwell, you were crazy, you were out of your mind, you couldn't be around people, you needed to be locked up, and people weren't treated correctly. You know, people were not taken care of. There was not enough treatment. There was not enough understanding of mental health and, you know, psychological disorders to really create a foundation for, you know, correct care in mental health. So now we're at a point where we're in progress. We are getting, you know, better treatments and better drugs and better, you know, therapy solutions, and, you know, the list goes on now that we're progressing and we're at a point in time where we have more resources and more education. You know, mental health care has significantly improved compared to what it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. But there's still a huge stigma, and people don't want to seek help. People don't want to admit they have a problem. People don't want to admit that they're lost or that they're sad or that they're going through something really horrible because of the way that others might treat them or that society might see them as.
When we're talking about the youth, do you think there should be a campaign educating children from elementary school level up to high school on how to handle their emotions and places to seek in case if it's needed?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that there needs to be a campaign of some kind. I mean, there's a lot of different organizations that, you know, raise money and
Yes,
reach
but they all
out.
normally cater to the adults.
Right. that cater to the adults and that are more focused on just mental health in general. But I definitely think that there needs to be more of a focus on our children and our youth, because as time is changing and, you know, social media is evolving and technology is evolving, the list goes on, things are changing and there's not as much, you know, person to person, eye to eye communication anymore. It's all through text, it's all through Facebook, it's all through Instagram, it's all through Snapchat. I mean, you name it, you don't have to physically be with somebody to communicate with them. And there's a huge blurred line with this and with social media, because all of those things are great. Social media makes, you know, things a lot more accessible for us. You know, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, you name it, makes communication a lot easier and more accessible. But I think that our youth is